Welcome everyone back to the channel. Welcome to your Season 1, Episode 3 review, Tell It to the Frogs, for The Walking Dead, as I go back through all the seasons and work my way up to the current time, if that's even possible. But welcome everyone. Maybe you hear it in the background, they're doing testing for the tornado siren, so if you hear that in the background, I apologize. They literally started that right as I started to record, so it is what it is. But how is everyone doing? How is everyone? This episode was kind of slow. Not a bad episode by any means, but a slower episode compared to episode 2. But still a good episode. Well, where do I begin? So this was a lot of dialogue in this episode, meeting more characters, setting up more characters. You finally meet Daryl for the first time. You get to see his interaction with Rick for the first time. You get to see Carol meet Rick for the first time, especially when you know where these characters are going to go as the season progresses. You get to see the look on the faces of Lori and Shane as they see Rick is alive. So you get to start seeing the dynamic that those three are going to have, little hints of it. It's a lot in this episode, but it's also kind of a slower episode. But by no means is this a bad episode. Let me say that right out the gate. Not a bad episode. It was actually quite an enjoyable episode. But you also get to get these little teases of seeing Shane start to kind of go. But this is also the episode where you're like, Lori's kind of annoying. Like, you get that. I will, okay, look, I'll be upfront. I was not, nor was I ever really a big fan of Lori's character. I always found her to be a little grating, kind of annoying at times, especially in this episode. The fact that she can't just be honest right up front, like, look, something was going on with me and Shane. You should know that. We thought you were dead. No, she doesn't say anything. You can see she's guilty, sure. But then she goes off on Shane multiple times. Or not multiple times, but she goes off on Shane, treats it like it's all Shane's fault. And you feel bad for Shane right away in this episode. Like, almost immediately. You're like, what the hell? What'd he do to you? Like, I don't remember him doing anything wrong. But maybe that's just me. You see the dynamic with Carol, and oh my gosh, going back to this episode and seeing how she is to seeing how she is now, it's like not even the same person anymore. To me, it feels like it's not even the same person anymore. But oh well. So this episode, though, it does start with Merle on the roof. He's kind of talking to himself. You can tell he's maybe he's being a little cooked from the Atlanta sun. This is summertime. Maybe he's being cooked from that Atlanta sun, but he's talking to himself, laughing hysterically. And then all of a sudden he kind of snaps back to reality and he freaks out. He starts to, beg God for some help. But then he shows that defiance that he, because he's Merle, shows that defiance, starts cursing God, says, I don't need you. And he's grabbing a belt and he's trying to get the saw. You see walkers trying to break through the door. So that's how it opens. Then we go to Rick and company. They're in the van. They're driving back. And they show back up. You get Glenn driving by them in that beautiful car with that alarm blaring. So we get to the camp. And Lori's trying to cut Carl's hair. And you see Shane, offering to show him how to catch some frogs. And they're kind of like, why? And he's, like, you ever had frog legs? They're like, ew. And he's like, no, not ew. Good. It's like, we'll be the saviors. And he's talking. And it's actually really beautiful interaction. Like, they have a really good dynamic as a family unit. even though they're still hiding the fact that they're a thing. But, so you get Glenn there, and he comes pulling in. They're like, what's going on? So they all go up there, and they get the alarm off, and he's kind of jumping Glenn like, what are you doing? Trying to draw every walker for miles here? Like, come on. And then the van shows up. Everyone sees everyone, and they're all happy, and Morales is like, all right, man, come meet everybody. So he gets out, and all the pleasantries, and they're like, well, how'd you all, Shane's like, well, how'd you all get out of there? And Glenn's like, the new guy. He's like, new guy? And Morales is like, yeah. He's like, a cop like you. He's like, hey, new guy, come on over. And Rick comes out, and he's looking a little like, oh, hi, everybody. Like, who is all these people? And then Shane catches a glimpse of him, and Shane, the look on Shane's face, like, oh my God, it's really him. And you can see in his face, he's legit happy to see Rick. But you think and you can also see, though, at a point, it also dawns on him like, oh, it's Rick. And you see Carl see his dad, and he just immediately starts to cry. And it's a really emotional scene with these guys. So he runs, and Lori, she's for a second just like stunned and dumbfounded. But then she runs. Rick, seeing Rick grab his son as a parent, it's like, oh my God, I couldn't even imagine at this moment. But Rick picks him up, and he's hugging him. And he walks up, and she's just in shock, and she's hugging him. And you can see they cut back to Shane a couple times, and Shane goes through all these emotions in this one scene. The acting in this scene is terrific. But you just see these looks on his face like elated and relieved, but at the same time, you can tell he's also very confused about what he wants to feel in the moment. But you can tell he's also really happy to see his best friend. But then we cut to them sitting around a campfire, and Rick's explaining, about waking up, being confused and everything. And, Carl's like, Mom said you were dead. He's like, well, your mom, had every right to think so. It looked like I was. So, you better believe that. And then we see Ed. We actually get to meet Ed not for the first time, but we actually get to see Ed and be Ed. And he's sitting around the fire with Sophia and Carol. And he adds another log to the fire, and Shane's like, hey, what you doing? And he tells Shane to mind his own business. But Shane, being the leader of the group, gets up. Like, look, you know how it goes. We do just the ambers, just enough. We don't want to draw any attention. And he's like just defiant. But he finally gives in, and he makes Carol get up and remove it. So you see he's very already mentally abusive. We'll find out more as the episode goes through. But, Shane gets down, shares pleasantries with Carol and Sophia, tells them don't worry about apologizing, not a big deal. Then Dale asks, what are we to do about Daryl? He says, this isn't going to go over well. They're all discussing maybe lying to him, this and that. T-Dog's just like, hey, I was scared and I ran. They're like, oh, well, we all were scared. He's like, yeah, but I chained him. I lost that key. Merle's still up there. He's alive, and that's on us. And you're kind of like, yeah, you locked this guy up there. You'd been better off just leaving the door. At least then he would have been killed something. But no, you locked him in up there and had no intentions of coming back. So we get a nice sweet moment with Carl, and then with Lori, Rick telling him that, he knew he would find them. Him and Lori are talking, and he says he knew when he went home and he saw the pictures, taken. He says he knew they were alive. He knew he'd find them. And you can, he's holding her at this moment, and you can see the guilt on her face. You can see the guilt that she's just like, oh, yeah. You can tell she's really like, she's feeling the guilty, but at the same time, you can also see that she's relieved and she's happy. They're looking through a photo album, and he puts Rick puts a picture of the three of them back in there, and she's apologizing and says she wishes she could take everything back, the anger, all of it, the fighting, and he says, hey, we have a second chance. And he sees the ring. He's like, oh, I was wondering where that was. She's like, well, do you want it back? He's like, yeah. So they start making out, they dim the lights, and bow, chicka, wow, wow. Then you see Shane on the roof of the RV as the storm's starting to roll in, which is a really nice shot to see the storm behind him starting to bubble up. And it's, I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much in it, but it's a really good symbolism for what's probably going on in Shane at this moment. He's definitely conflicted and things are starting to bubble for him. Just starting, and you see that storm behind him doing the same thing, and you can even in that moment see the frustration on his face because now he doesn't know what to do. And I don't think at this point Shane is necessarily hating Rick. Definitely not at this moment, but you can tell like the seed's planted and he's feeling some sort of kind of way at this moment, at least. So we get to Rick waking up the next day. He's moving around the camp and he meets Carol, who's washed his clothes, telling him, it's, not as good as, the old Maytag back home. Because, they're still very fresh into this post-apocalyptic world. It's only been, weeks. It's not even been all that long yet. And you kind of have to remind yourself, especially when you're, 11 seasons into the show. So you're still like, you have to put yourself back into, oh yeah, this is still really early in the whole thing. He has a conversation with Lori where he's like, hey, I think I want to go back and get that guy. And they don't really get to finish the conversation. Shane pulls up and he's got water. Rick's like, I want to do this. She's like, are you sure? He's like, yes. But then they hear Carl scream and then they hear Sophia scream and everyone starts to rush to them and they see a walker's there. It's eating deer. So they kill it, of course. And they're talking about how the walkers have never came up this far up the mountain. Why are they coming? And it's like, well, food. I think it's Josh, I think is his character's name. But he's like, there's, they're running out of food in the city, so they're starting to wander. They're starting to look for stuff. And then they start to hear branches and stuff snapping in the background. And then out comes Daryl. So we see Daryl for the first time. And he's like, damn, I've been tracking that deer. And he kicks the walker, cussing at it. He says, but hey, I got some squirrels. And, Dale being Dale, trying to be the dad of everybody. Oh, do you really think that's necessary? And he's like, what'd you say, old man? I liked Dale, but sometimes I found Dale to be utterly fucking annoying. So when Dale finally does die, spoiler, I was actually quite okay with it. I found Dale to be a little annoying. Anyways, so Daryl's back in the camp. He's looking for Merle. Hey, Merle, come on, got some squirrel. Make squirrel soup. And, okay, another thing. Listening to Daryl talk now versus how he is in the current season is like night and day. He's like, golly, it's so different. But Shane's like, hey man, I gotta tell you something. There, problems in Atlanta. And Daryl's like, what? And he's like, well, Merle, he's like, is he dead? Well, no. And then Rick's like, look, he was cuffed up there, and we, this and that. And they tell him everything that happened, and he reacts how you think one would respond. He's just kind of like, wait, what? Excuse me? And he gets a little mad, and he gets physical, but then he's restrained by both Rick and Shane, and they take a knife from him, and he's basically like, y'all go to hell, like. And then the whole time, like, I couldn't help but notice the whole time, from this moment on, the shit that they talked about Merle right in front of Daryl, like, whatever, dude, fuck you. Like, we don't care how you feel. This is how we feel about your brother. And it's like, well, damn, y'all. Like, show a little compassion. It's still his brother, no matter how you feel. So even at this moment, you can still see the social status that people might have coming out of the world. Oh, well, they're just a couple of rednecks, who cares? Well, then why the fuck do you have them in your group if that's such a big issue? Oh, that's right, because they can get you food. Y'all can't hunt, but they can. Makes sense. So Rick offers to kind of go back and help him find Merle, because they tell him, he's like, well, tell me where he's at so I at least can go get him. And then Rick's like, well, I'll go with you. And Lori's clearly, like, not happy about this. So Shane, and him are walking, and Shane's like, why? Just tell me why. You just got here, you're leaving your family. And he says, I can't leave a man to die. And he's like, well, I wouldn't give this man a glass of water. And he's like, it's not about that. He's like, you can tell Shane's very content to, we got to do what we got to do to survive, no matter what the cost. Rick is still very much holding on to that life that there was before. He's still officer friendly in a way. He's like, look, I'm not going to leave a man up there to die. It's not fair. It's not right. It doesn't matter who it is. And he asks Glenn to come. Glenn reluctantly does. And then T-Dog volunteers, and Daryl's like, why would you come? He's like, man, you wouldn't even understand. We don't even speak the same language. So Shane, he's still not for it. He says, we need people to protect the camp. We had a walker up here. More are going to come. Rick says, look, I got to get this bag of weapons. We got all these weapons, and I know you need those. And Laurie's like, I want to know why you're willing to leave. He says, look, man who helped me. He's talking about Morgan. He's like, him and his son. I owe him. He's like, we're supposed to communicate. And she's like, well, what's stopping you? He's like, the walkie. It's in the bag. I need that. And then Shane explains why the two wouldn't work with their CBs. So he's going. And then you see him make a deal with Dale, who's needing stuff fixed. He's wanting some stuff. And then Josh I think his name's Josh. Same thing. Look, we need the hose so we can get this thing running again. Shane makes Rick take some rounds with him, explains again, hey, I'm not okay with this, but if you're going to go, take this with you. Lori goes in and checks on Carl. She asks him if he's worried. He's like, no. He's like, are you? She's like, a little worried. Carl's like, I'm not. And she's like, why? He's like, he ain't died yet. He got to us once before. And you already see the maturity of Carl at this point, and Lori's insecurities already coming through. So they arrive in Atlanta, and you see the tension between them, and they flash between scenes of them going and looking and deciding where to go first. So that happens. We get Lori looking for Carl. This is towards the end of the show. So we get Lori. She's looking for Carl. And Dale's like, oh, he went down. I know it wasn't Dale. I forgot who it was. I don't know, it might have been Dale. He's like, oh, went with Shane. Something about frogs. So we see Shane and Carl catching these frogs, or trying to catch these frogs, and it's an adorable scene. Like, seeing them just having a good time is so nice. Meanwhile, you see the ladies, Carol, Amy, and Andrea, and Jackie, all washing clothes and folding them, and talking about, what are we doing this? Like, it's an apocalypse, and we're still doing laundry. They start talking about things they miss, their internet, their phones, their vibrators. Like, it's again a reminder of like how early it is in this, and just how they're still adjusting to everything and how it all works, and so on and so forth. And Ed's kind of there, and you get a very intense scene with Ed. Lori shows up to the camp, and she tells Carl, I told you to stay with Dale. Go back home. Shane's like, hey, hold on. She's like, no, you don't get that. Like, all of a sudden she's shutting him down. So angry towards him. Oh, you don't get this right. You lost that right. Like, what did he do wrong? You told me my husband was dead. And when you see they do show this later in the season, he wasn't lying. He thought he was dead. He really wanted to take him, but there was nothing he could do. But then she's just like, you've lost that right. Don't look at me. Don't look at him. She's like, I don't think that's fair. And she gets kind of physical with him. And you're like, what the fuck, man? Why are you being like this? So, wrong timing. Ed starts to kind of bully everyone, throws laundry back in Andrea's face, says, I ain't got to do nothing. You're a woman, blah, 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 blah. He's trying to make Carol leave. They're like, no, Carol, don't go. And he's like, nah. And he slaps Carol, like bloodies her lip. And all these women are trying to hit on him, and he's like fighting back with the women. And then here comes Shane, pissed off, grabs him, throws him on the ground. And at first they're all like, okay, cool, he's going to handle this situation. He starts punching him, and he keeps going and going and going. And Shane fucks him up. And finally Shane's like, look, you ever touch your wife, your daughter, or anyone else in this camp, I will. He's like, I'll kill you next time. I won't stop. He punches him again. And then Carol, the abusive wife, is just on top of him. And it's like, oh my God, this is not the Carol that I know anymore. But that's showing you, like, the fact that Shane can lose it. And in this scene, I think rightfully so, he has all the right in the world to be angry, and Ed just made bad timing in this scene. So finally we get to, as it climaxes with the music, Rick, Glenn, T-Dog, and Daryl going up those steps to the top of that roof. They cut the chain, they get out there, and no Merle. Merle is gone. All you got is some bloody cuffs and a saw and a hand all by itself, and you can see Daryl is quite upset at this moment. But that's how the episode ends, with the shot of that hand and them on the roof. It was, look, like I said, this was a slower episode, but it was still a really good one nonetheless. Like, I still really enjoyed this episode. I'm still really enjoying going back through. The next episode, we're going to be introduced to a gang. The search for Merle is going to start, and shit's about to go down for the first time. Like, really for the first time in this season. So I think these first 3 episodes have done really well at just establishing everything, getting you to know these characters. And it's been enjoyable so far. So 3 episodes for the season down, 3 episodes for the season to go. We are there, and I had fun. So we'll go through this season. I think into the first week of December is when this season will be over. We'll take a few weeks break and come back for the new year. So, but I'm Zach. Thank you all for joining me today. Remember, everyone, happy turkey season. Number 1, we are into turkey season. If you're not already, subscribe to the channel. Like, share these videos with your friends. Hit the like button, hit the like button, hit the like button. It helps circulate the channel. So, with all that said, I really am not good at these outros, but remember, stay healthy, stay safe, and remember, as always, join the nation. Y'all have a great day.